Thank you for being here. Let's see. I'm just going to go to gallery view so I can see more of you. I still see people are connecting. If you can, if you're able, if you feel comfortable, having your video on is, I think it's makes it easier to try and create some community. I know not everyone has the capacity to do so, but if you feel comfortable and able, that would be great. Just because in doing this important kind of work, I think the more we can feel connected to one another, the easier I think we can really connect to the work within ourselves and make those connections with our colleagues. Okay, so I'm gonna be sharing a PowerPoint really just for some like visual interest, but this is a very dialogue heavy workshop. I want you to do a lot of the thinking and feeling and talking around this process. I think it's really easy to intellectualize the work and remove it from where it lands within ourselves and how that manifests in the work that we do. So just also putting that out there. And please feel free to use the emojis. You should be able to, I get maybe all you can do is raise your hand. Okay, I wasn't sure if you had more like smile, thumbs up. But if you want to say something, just use that. And if for whatever reason I can't see you, just go ahead and say, hey, Lizette, I'd love to say something. Okay. I go to share screen right now. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to begin with a quick prompt. I know I haven't introduced myself. I know, and this is all part of how I'm having a step into this work. So the question is, are you ready for real? And then I put it's now or now, right? It's now because it could have been yesterday. And that would have already felt a little bit like we were behind in what we need to be doing as educators. So my prompt for all of you is, where is your joy and where is your grief this morning? So where is your joy and where is your grief? Given the title of this workshop, right? Are you ready for real? And then also my prompt that I added in this morning, right? It's now or now. Where is your joy? Where is your grief? If you are a writer, as you think, go ahead and type your response to that. If you'd like to place it in the chat, that would be great because I think it locates where we are as a learning community this morning. We can see where other people are in that question. Or if you just want to think it through. So go ahead and utilize the chat or just think about it actively in your own head and or write it in your journal. And we will be doing a popcorn out. Would anybody like to jump in? see. Demand. Would you like to share either your joy or your grief or both this morning?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I was typing. I'm on two computers at the same time. You know, with COVID and virtual this and virtual that, I'm always on two or three different screens. So I was actually typing when you called my name. First of all, good morning. Well, good afternoon. Actually, I just got back in town. I just got back home. So I was off the camera at first. I need a haircut. But anyway, my joy is number one to be here with you fine people, being alive first and foremost. Always, daily, every single day. Number one, my joy. My grief in terms of this work is that it's 2021. I just turned 55 years old. I might be the elder on here, maybe not. I don't know. But at 55, the fact that we're still going through this kind of work, right? And especially this recognized holiday of King Day, we're still having these kind of conversations, right? At this day and age. And hopefully, you know, the Most High blesses me with 30, 40 more years of life. And I see it, you know, but, you know, being an abolitionist educator is my mission to do the best I can while I'm on this earth to try to help all people, you know, hopefully come together. And I do it in various pockets, but just being a part of forums like this and different places where I work and serve, I'm gonna do my part as much as I possibly can. But my grief is the fact that we're still doing this now, right? And it's, you know, we saw what happened last week and all this kind of stuff and whatever. So the struggle continues.
Thank you, Damon. I love the I don't know why it's the abolitionist educator piece. I think if you can mute
Definitely.
yourself, then we don't have to hear me in echo. Thank you. See what anyone, I'm going to call on 4, 5, 6 people just to manage your own expectations. I see your hand, Margaret. I want to listen. I want to hear from Dimmy.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Demi Herard, and my joy is to, I'm joyous about the opportunity to participate in this forum. I think it is important to address diversity directly and head on. I think that um, you know, I think that classrooms are strengthened when we can bring a variety of different perspectives to the fore. And it really kind of enriches the learning experience. My grief, you know, I think whenever there are efforts towards change, there's often resistance to change. And I think what we are experiencing currently is a manifestation of that, right? Efforts to move towards a more, I think, inclusive society, one that acknowledges um, various experiences, is one that um, is going, that effort forward is always going to meet some level of resistance. So thank you for allowing me to participate in this event. So thank you.
Thank you, Dimmy. It's great. Thanks so much. Margaret, why don't you go ahead?
I just want to say thank you to both the speakers and to you first for just all of this. And I think my joy is, you know, my child, my community, books, teaching, but also having resources like this in what is such a traumatic time for so many people. And you know, we're having conversations that are so long overdue. And I think some of the violence and the hatred comes from the progress and advances we're making. But at the same time, my grief is where we are as a culture in the world and how we still have to say it's not a difference of opinion. It's not left versus right. It is right versus wrong, as Rodney Glasgow, Dr. Glasgow said. And, you know, I just feel so tired by the hate. And on my father's family, they're survivors of racial violence and like deep trauma in Europe, and both in Odessa and in the Holocaust, pogroms. And, you know, I look at I just don't know how we're still here. You know, how, you know, I can look at what happened in 1906 in Odessa to my grandmother as a child, and how we are here, and people can walk into that building in those t-shirts and they can find, somebody can construct a noose, as Dr. Glasgow said. Like, we know what would happen if those people look different. I know what happened at the Black Lives Matter protests in Boston I took my son to, and the police presence there for families gathered at a peaceful protest organized by a church versus, so that disconnect is just really fills me with grief, right? The propaganda that's still being put out about even a comparison to the Black Lives Matter versus, you know, people who didn't like an election result are being compared to people asking just for human life and dignity. It's that there's so much work to be done. And so my grief is sometimes overwhelming, because how do we keep having these conversations? How do we move forward? And then back to my joy, it is children, it is teaching, it is my son and his community of children being raised to know that hate is not a difference of opinion.
Would anybody like to go? Jennifer, I see your hand. I'm just looking to see if there's anyone else in the... Is it W. Tang?
Yes.
Can you go, please? And then Jennifer will follow you.
Dr. Dolan and my colleagues, so happy to see you virtually. Actually, simply put it, teaching is joy, especially during this isolated time. Students are frustrating, they're experiencing crisis mentally, physically. I currently teach in a public school. I teach 280 students, like 35 in one class. So, but a bigger class for me is not an issue. So many students that are failing. While so many students are doing so awesome, I teach only 6th graders, because the teaching Mandarin Chinese is such a great honor. And especially for students starting from 6th grade, the huge burden, responsibility on my shoulders. If I teach successfully, they will be continued learning. Otherwise, if I fail teaching, they won't take Chinese in the future. So super essential. So every single day, I teach 4 periods. Every single day, I enjoy every minute with my students. That's the fun part, teaching, and also communication with my colleagues. And today, like I said, online in the forum organized by Carney Sander, really appreciate it. But you know that so many students are failing seriously, especially public schools, especially private school. I was teaching private school 20 years before, now this year in public school. In the future, maybe still come back to private school, like the smaller group. You know, so many students, especially like I said, experiencing so many problems. So many students and family got infected by virus. They told me again and again. So what I can do is to offer them more days turning homework, providing some office hours to help them. But also, I want to mention that diversity is the reality in this country. But while we are advocate ourselves, the educators, ensure the equity in the classroom settings. But personally, I'm Asian. You know, I'm from China. I never experienced. I have a bios myself. When I was coming over here in Boston like 10 years ago, 2009, when I was walking with my wife, and a black young guy, like some guy who slapped me by face, slapped me. Yeah, I'm not against black people. Sorry, we're equal. But that leaves me very deep impression that maybe I developed the bios about this younger black. Yeah, guys, they may be undereducated. That's why I feel so sorry for them, because of their education, they need more education, change their status for Black Americans. From that time, I may develop bias against that group of students, right? But that's so wrong myself. As an educator, I cannot have this bias. You know, President Obama, he is Black, African, but he's our leaders, right? That's great. Also, he himself changed our homes, our families' lives. Because myself, I changed my status from H1 to green card during the waiting for H1 visa. So due to the Obama administrations, they have a policy to issue my wife an H4 status, the work status, so she could work, right? So I really appreciate it for the Black American president. So I immediately changed my bios again, that group of people, right? Until now, so January 6th, right? So there's the riots happening in the capital. So I didn't realize that, something the white nationality is so strong, becomes the culture so strong. I never have, seriously, I have to be very frank with my colleagues, I never have a bias against white people until now, January 8th. I live here in Las Vegas. I live in the communities. One day I was walking outside, I was a white lady, right? Like 40, 50, come just in this communities, come over here and run into me, yelling, "You're Communist Party, go back to your fucking China." Wow, really serious. Our country is becoming a Communist Party country now. I said, hey, calm down. We're all human beings. I never prepared for like a white people, right? Yelling at me, screaming. That's a personal experience. Until now, I think I report to these communities, my personal experience. I never have any bias against white people. Now, I like to take notes, write logs, right? During every single day, I write, jot them down. I never had any bias against white people in this country until now. Because we're human beings, we all have a bias, right? Myself. So I have a lot of communication with this local, with my school too. Okay, I email them. Actually, the administration in this department, they're really responsible. They have very quick response. I think they talked to the ladies. I never know her, I never met her before. So they said, you should report the police. I said, I hope, okay? If this is happening again, I call police immediately, right? But, otherwise, this is something, so for personal experience, reflecting, should I have bias? Yeah, we do. Seriously, I do. But the classroom-wise, I told the administration, I'm a teacher. I have to ensure the equity in the classroom. How do I address this happening in myself, also in the classroom myself? So this is the very serious issues. I shouldn't put aside my personal view. And this is just my personal experience. So the diversity, equity, and also this, this kind of things, equity is not just talking, is real happening with ourselves. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think what you bring up is just that, yes, we all have biases. If we have a brain, we have a bias. And I think one of the other things that we need to remember, and I'm going to say this later, in as we do our work together, we're still in the introduction phase, is we have all been impacted by white supremacy. And we can't say, I don't have it. It's part of the cloth of being a USian. And it's part of the cloth of being a good USian, is to have taken the lessons, whether they've been implicit or explicit, of white supremacy, and practicing those so that those with the formal positions of power don't have to. We can do the dirty work for them. Jennifer, love to hear from you. If you could keep it crisp, that'd be great. Thank you.
Unmute. I'll just keep this very short. It's not so much it brings me joy, but what I'm grateful for is I'm starting to see that I can bring up issues now that were taboo in the classroom, and talking about things, how, everyone coming together, really not whitewashing. I'm a history teacher, so whitewashing history, but really bringing up the real issues, looking at primary sources and questioning what is really going on in the system, and having the kids see what goes on in the system. What really frustrates me, and I don't want to sound rude, I've been out of the country for like 17 years, and I could really see, there's so many, just like a few schools, it's so far a few in between, that really practice what they preach about diversity and making change. So that's basically my grief right now. It's like, I just don't see in some places that there's this sincerity about it. I really want to see a lot of action.
Thank you. Okay, now I appreciate you going with me on this. We're still in our introductory, and this is actually an activity. So I'm going to put you. Oh, I'm not. My Nicholas, who's a great helper today, he's going to put you into groups of 4. And the prompt for you as a group of 4 is to talk about what you noticed from when I started at 10:06 to now. What did you notice about what we experienced? Okay? And I'm going to give you about 7 minutes in those breakout groups. Nicholas, are you there?
Yes, Lizette, I'm ready.
Okay, great. I was just making sure you got the request. So in your groups, your random groups of 4 or 5, when you get the invitation to go into breakout rooms, accept it. And you're going to talk and you're going to discuss what you noticed during this initial introduction activity. Okay? Any questions? And you'll come back and share back. And then we'll move forward and everything will kind of make a little bit more sense, hopefully. Okay, Nicholas, are we ready to go with the breakouts?
Yes. How much time do you want the breakouts to go?
7 minutes. Within those breakouts, too, if you could just share your name, your pronouns, and the main subject that you teach. We understand that teachers, educators, we often wear multiple hats, but maybe what's the biggest hat that you wear? And just that, just so that there's some beginning of knowing one another, but then really keeping the space to have the conversation of what you noticed. So your name, your pronouns, and your biggest hat. Okay? And then discuss that, and you'll come back in 7 minutes. Okay, great.
I'm gonna open the rooms for 7 minutes, and then they will automatically close after 30 seconds. You will get a.
And Nicholas, I saw that you invited me into the room, but I'm not going to go into it, okay?
Okay, actually, let me do something for you, so you can, if you wanna like
Pop in.
join them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you a co-host, and then just so you know, room 1 has 4, room 2 has 3, room 3 has 3. Basically, everybody's 3, but 7.
Is
Let me assign Patty to the last one.
Katie, yeah.
Yeah, for some reason she didn't got the not yet.
All right.
So basically,
Awesome.
room 1 has 4, and all the rest have 3. And then if you want,
All
you
right,
can just
awesome.
swap in, and I'll be here.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hello, Lizette. So everybody's coming back from the breakouts.
Yes. All right. Okay, good. There you are. What did you notice? Let me hear from Margaret, just because you lived it.
Do you mean me?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean I lived? You mean in the breakout rooms? What do we notice? Or
No, what did you notice about
in
what
the
happened out
seven
here?
months? I
No.
have to say, I'm sorry, I'm confused. I apologize. I noticed I'm overwhelmed. I guess that's what I noticed. In good and bad ways. We're all so overwhelmed right now. I'm so excited to be digging into this conversations and this work, but I'm overwhelmed.
Okay. Did anybody else maybe who didn't like live that first 20 minutes with me? Who noticed something? Marilyn.
We didn't actually get to the part where we talked about what we noticed just because we were getting to know each other, but I will say this. I think I've noticed that people are really excited to be able to be in a place where we can start doing this work, but really exhausted from the last several years of like trying to survive.
What else did you notice about how that went? Jennifer B.
We noticed that you were calling on people of color and males, and the women, white women who were raising their hands were asked to wait.
Yes. Yes. What did I do specifically, Jennifer Martin, when I said, does someone else have someone? It was almost like I planted you all. It was wonderful, and I'm so sorry. Jennifer, you raised your hand, and I said, Jennifer, I see you. And I waited. And then W. Tang raised his hand, and I called on him. What did that feel like? Did anybody notice that? I know you can't see. Did anyone notice that I did that? Jennifer B. did. Aaron did.
I was happy you did that. You're just being very mindful.
Okay.
And it's hard on Zoom because like when I teach on Zoom, I mean, that's all I do is I can't see all the boxes unless someone raises their hand. So I feel sometimes that I'm skipping over people and hurting their feeling, you know, like not being equitable in my classroom. And I'm like, you know, so I have a rule, but I try to get every voice in. So I appreciate what you did.
Okay. Callie?
Oh, I was just sort of agreeing with like noticing kind of thing. And it was sort of like interesting. I feel like it was going on the same, it was sort of like you were doing what we would probably do in a classroom where we would go to the people of the minority to talk about a minority subject kind of thing, possibly. And just sort of like instituting the biases that we've been talking about, like, but flipping it, I guess, on its head a little bit.
Okay. Denise?
I had a student tell me a story one time about how he had this teacher who treated him like he was invisible. And what you were doing made me think of that. He said that the teacher, he would raise his hand in the class and the teacher would call on students like behind him, to the right of him, anything but him. And it was like, oh, I guess I'm not here. And he just never got called on. And I thought that that's what it felt like.
How did I respond to, I see your hand, perfect, Damon. How did I respond to Damon and Demi when they spoke? How did I make you feel? Damon?
So to what all the ladies were saying, I felt special, right? You called on me first. I wasn't ready. I haven't had a haircut in a while, but you know, still nonetheless, I was called on first. And I'm not saying that's never happened before, but in these spaces, typically that's not the norm. I don't know you, you don't know me. I'm seeing all the ladies, those that identify as ladies and so on and so forth in the space here. And I'm like, well, this is an equity forum. So I imagine to be more embracing and all encompassing, right? But still, even sometimes in those spaces, it becomes like checking the box kinds of things, right? You know, so I was very happy to speak first. And even in our breakout group, I began to talk and I had to apologize. I didn't want to dominate the conversation, but we ran out of time because I began talking too much though, because I'm enthusiastic to talk about this work. But it made me feel special and it was different. I've never really called on first in these spaces.
Interesting. Jimmy.
Hello. In our group, we did talk about how, you know, there's a lot of conversation about Black males in the classroom. There not being very many Black males in the educational field. And so we surmised that there was a likelihood that you chose us to speak first because of that reality in education.
Thank you. So what I will say, and this is a difficult, I've never done this on Zoom, and it's very hard because I was thinking people are going to think I'm the worst facilitator ever, and they're going to start dropping out, right? And people at Kearney are going to be like, what the heck? Why did we bring this chick in here to do this? She's terrible, right? But interesting, we all just experience intersectionality. I'm going to go there in a second. But really what I do here is I practice open sexism. I ask the men to speak. I skip over the women. After Damon and Demi and W. Tang spoke, each time I made a comment about what they said. Like, oh, that's interesting, or it's connected to this. When both Margaret and Jennifer spoke, I said, thank you, and I moved on. Right? And the reason, and it just turned out that the three people that I perceived to be men, because I don't know, I happened to present as men of color. So then we have this intersectional thing that happened, is giving space to them because they did present as men of color. But what if they had been white men, right? It really didn't pick them because they were men of color. I picked them because they were men. But then the intersectional piece, especially two of the three people were Black men, right? It gave this level of, maybe it wasn't about that. That I was absolutely practicing sexism. And the reason why I do that is because here we are a diversity forum, and I'm being allowed to actively silence people, right? To diminish in very, very innocuous ways. But it isn't innocuous, right? It just looks that way. And why was I allowed to do that? Did anyone wonder, like, wow, this doesn't feel right? Even after W. Tang, right? He spoke for a while. And on whose shoulders was that placed? Did anybody notice that? On whose shoulders did I place that? Denise.
I noticed you let him express himself freely. And then when it was time for Ms. Martin to speak, you said, keep it crisp.
Right? And it's so insidious, right? And we let it because I have the positional authority in this space, right? And then Demond, you were like, I'm feeling good. So then you took that good feeling, which I'm glad you feel good. You should feel good more often. you took that good feeling into your small group. What were they, women presenting people or male presenting people in your small group?
There were two females.
Okay. And so you start by apologizing. I don't want to take too much space and time. Did you take up all the space and time?
Most of it, yes. The countdown began, and it was time to go.
Interesting. Any other thoughts now that you kind of like it's been exposed? What else did you notice? Or is there anything else that I haven't mentioned about how that went? So now I'm sort of going to ask that hopefully the transparency piece that we would ask our students, right? Like, why do you think I did that? What is it as we move into the real and then I'm actually going to introduce myself and I'm actually going to set a beautiful space for us to work in. But why do you think? Erin, Stacy.
I mean, I know in my experience working in DEI, after going to POCC and a bunch of other workshop type experiences, as the white woman in the room, it's my job to shut up and listen and wait and not take up the space, to restrain myself from dominating, to always be cognizant of who's in the room with me and wait. And so I think you've set us up for a beautiful conversation to lean into that.
Yes, I think that's a piece of it, the awareness, who's in the room, what do I bring, what does my identity bring to this particular space and how does it impact it? Because there are also times when your voice as a white person, with the power that it yields, can also do a lot to make a space perhaps be more inclusive, right? Depending. But yeah, it's leaning into the conversation and leaning into the conversation within our intersectional identities, right? Why does it matter? Also, why does it matter that I am a woman of color that is presenting? How does that play into the conversation? I'm going to share my screen. All right. So, and I'm aware that I'm not showing this as a presentation, and it's okay because it's easier to get out of it in this view. So who am I? And I have my credentials and my story, because I think oftentimes in academia, our credentials are sort of how we say who we are, and yet it's not who we are, it's not who I am. I am born and raised San Francisco, California, to immigrant parents from Central America. They came in the 60s. My mom from Costa Rica, my dad from Nicaragua. I am a product of independent schools. I went on to UC Berkeley, where I double majored in history and dance and double minored in education and drama. And I graduated with honors in history for a work I did on the evolution of Latino youth gangs in the San Francisco Mission. Then I went on and I worked back east. I worked at the Potomac School in Virginia in the Teachers New to Teachers program, Teachers New to Teaching program through the Multicultural Alliance. And that's when I went to my first POCC, which was in Puerto Rico that year. And that was back in '98. And then I worked at middle school, came back to California, then decided I probably should actually learn how to do this. So I went to Harvard and I got my master's in teaching and curriculum with an emphasis in adolescent female identity formation. And I got my credential in political philosophy and economics Then I went and taught him at my alma mater high school back in San Francisco. For 4 years, I did mostly, not mostly, I did history, US history, world history, but was also in the dance and drama department. And then I became a dean of equity and inclusion at the Athenian School in Danville, California, boarding and day school, and I was there for 7 years. During that time, I earned my doctorate in education with an emphasis in educational leadership, and I wrote my dissertation on the experiences of self-identified Latinos within predominantly white spaces. Then I became middle school head at Park Day School in Oakland. Then I became a vice principal at Carondelet, and realized that the further up I got in the ladder, the further away I got from why I got into education. And it took a pretty heavy toll on me emotionally, needing to silence myself and, being told if you want to be the head of school, eventually you shouldn't do too much diversity work. It was a lot. And so I did yoga for like a year. And again, there was some privilege that I had to be able to make that choice, right? To step away from it all. Not meaning to get emotional, but noticing the impact that independent schools had wreaked on me as a child all the way into adulthood. And so, so now I'm doing this on the side mostly, but I'm back in the classroom this year because of COVID. Athenian needed more bodies. And so I'm really happy to be back and teaching constitutional law and US history. And that is absolutely where my joy lives, which is with the kids. So those are my credentials and that's my story. Let's see, there was something on, I'm a crier. There also, I wanted to show you this, which is the Chinese symbol for listening. And I love it because it is about obviously hearing, but that if you're going to listen from a space of potential transformation, you have to be a part of that listening, right? Of noticing how you're listening, why you're listening the way that you are, what you're hearing, and your heart's involved and you're seeing yourself and also sort of letting the speaker be a mirror to you and perhaps also a window. We're going to come back to this later, but I did want to share this beautiful image. And I'm going to get to this later when it happens organically, I think. Here are the objectives for the last 35 minutes that we're together. Build upon prior, you've already hopefully done some of this work. Let's continue building. I don't want to say we're just starting the conversation now. I just think that, and I've heard that so much at so many schools and so many organizations that we're really happy to be finally having this conversation. And it's like, some of us have been living the conversation, and this is not a new thing. And some people have been working and doing the work and not just having the conversation. So I think it's really important to take opportunities to build upon model of brave space, which is hopefully what we're already doing, creating some clarity for yourselves about the role that you play wherever you sit on the bus of your organization. And then also constantly taking it back to your school or your organizational mission or your classroom, or if you're in the admissions department or advancement, like how locate this work into your work really specifically. Okay. So any questions or comments? And as we go, there might just be some moments when there's an aha or something that comes to you. W. Tang.
Yeah, Dr. Dolan, I thought your Chinese heritage because the characters is so deep. It's a traditional. I'm teaching my Chinese myself, so I was first thinking you are Chinese, but you're not from China. Sorry, no Asian heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany.
I just popped in late. I was going to say, I was going to make a comment or story on my family. My parents are from Honduras. They came over here in the 60s. I'm a product of the public education system. I just graduated in 2020
Wow.
From college, from Williams College. And I was just going to say that your talk of the independent school, I have no idea anything about it because I've only been through the public education system and POC schools, but going to Williams College in a white space as a minority is not only as people confuse me for being Mexican or making racist comments to me. As a Central American and a Honduran, it was very uneasy, and this did affect me mentally and spiritually. So I was wanting to say thank you for sharing because I really connected with what you were saying. And especially when living in this, in diversity 90, because I'm part of Call to Action's anti-racist team.
Thank you. The one thing I wanted to call out is really trying to move, language is so powerful. And I've been, in the past couple of years, I've moved towards using the term minoritized, right? We are systemically minoritized. We are not minorities, especially in some spaces, as in our own neighborhoods. We're not minorities in our own neighborhoods, but society and systems have minoritized us. And so I think shifts in language are really important. And the way that I'm gonna, I think I want to switch gears right now. We'll see. I have lots of plans that we could go to, but as a dance, this is gonna make sense. As a dance teacher, I teach technique through choreography, right? If I tell 12-year-old girls who have never danced before, we're not gonna start doing a dance for another 6 months. They're not gonna come back, right? But if I put on Britney Spears' Toxic, and I have them moving, and then I say, we're gonna do a pencil turn, and they're like, what's a pencil turn? And then I stop and teach a pencil turn for 20 seconds, right? They're in it. So all of that to say is, as I go today, right, I want us to be able to just have a conversation, and then I'll stop and do the teacher thing, right? So that is, and frankly, the notion of, anyways, that was my point in stopping and talking about the notion of the minoritization of groups of color, right? And how do our own systems and how do our language, how do we do that? I also, say systemically underrepresented. We're not underrepresented by accident, right? It's a system, whether it's bodies that are unrepresented or stories or opportunities for meaning making of those stories, right? One of the initial slides I put up was, I often hear, what I don't know won't hurt me. And I think about 10 years ago, use of plastic bags. I had no idea the impact that disposable plastic bags, like for produce, what it was doing to our environment. Was it hurting me? Yeah, I just didn't know it. So I think it's really false, right? When we say what I don't know won't hurt me, because it might. And even if it's not hurting me, it's certainly going to be hurting someone else, right? And so this movement towards earth community, right? And this sense of accountability and responsibility to one another, for one another. And I'm just gonna keep just pausing to see in case there's if anyone wants to say anything or ask anything. Okay, I'm gonna go back. So I live in Walnut Creek in California. And I think another practice that is so important is to name the land as part of how we're here, and also honoring and remember the people. And so for me, the people here are the Ohlone people. And again, if we were in a conference room, I would ask you to stand if you were able, and that we would start facing the east. The east is the direction from which the new day comes. It's the direction of the renewal. It's the place where anything is possible, right? Where we can believe in what we can't see. And today, if we begin, we can have the intention to use every moment today as an opportunity for growth in wisdom and in our own strength. If we were able to, we would turn to the south, which is the direction of the sun at the highest point. It's the place of fullness, of youth. It's the time when we prepare for the fall and for the winter. So symbolically, it's a time for preparing for the future and to get ready for the days ahead. If we were able to, we would turn to the south, and this is where new and fresh rain comes. And we ask for the ways in which we can have goodness and gentleness in our heart and in our speech. The west is the place from where darkness comes. It's direction of the unknown. It's the place of testing, where the will is stretched to our outer limits, so that the gift of perseverance may be won. And the north is the place of winter. It reminds us of our elders, and so we must always call upon our elders, which again, I think Demond mentioned this in the beginning, but Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday was on Friday, but we honor him today. And it's a way to remember, and that to the north is where we find our courage to walk each day and overcome our fears and anxiety. Again, intention setting. What is my intention for the work that we do together here? Or what's your intention for the work that you do within education in general, right? When you're not explicitly doing diversity and inclusion, you're doing diversity and inclusion, right? And even in the way, again, in which I began the session. Thoughts, questions? I'm purposely appealing to your hearts and not your intellect.
I was going to comment if there's space for me. Billy.
Billy.
I was just going to say, you did appeal to my heart. And in the same time, I was thinking it takes up a lot of time to do that. And a lot of time in the spaces that we're given, it's finite. It's how much can we pack into it? How much can we walk away with? And a lot of times that overlooks the individuals who we're working with It overlooks who we are and that kind of relationship between us and them. And I was thinking, I saw your PowerPoints, and so the intellectual aspect of me, or the person who's used to these norms, is like, oh my gosh, she's got a lot to get through. How are we going to get through it all? And the other side of me is like, well, no, Bill, like this matters as equal as well. It's a different objective perhaps, or maybe you get it from a different route, but they both are of value. And I have to continue to say, okay, who am I working with, and why do I feel this way, and check in with myself. So I was just saying it matters to me. So thanks.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those, let me also say, this workshop may have, or this session may have been different if it was not the first one, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, if I can take one for the team and create a space of openness and of like internal placing this, okay, it's sort of like, let me dig through my purse and make space for what I'm going to take in, as opposed to, I'm going to be going through all these workshops and like, okay, I'll stuff it in and I'll organize it later, right? And you've got things flying out, right? It's almost like, how can I participate in creating a container, an intentional container for either all of you participating or for your own selves, right? Or in the beginning of the school year with students, or you have a brand new team, 80-20. If I spend a lot of time community building, when misunderstandings happening, when gaffes happen, when people say and do the wrong thing, it's gonna be a lot easier to notice, attend to, and repair relationships than it would be if that initial work hadn't been done. But yeah, believe you me, I'm thinking, I've got a captive audience here, right? Now's the time. So, and really trying to model my own self coming in with humility of like, I think I know what I think you would like to know. And how can I also follow you? I also feel confident enough in what I know about this that I can pivot really quick too, right? So there's all of those things. But thank you for saying that, Billy, and for naming that, right? Like the anxiety of, what are we doing? Are we doing the work yet? And this is the work, right? Because if we don't do this work, then the other stuff ain't gonna work. Or not long-term. I don't think they're sustainable, or it's sustainable even for yourself. Okay, I'm gonna tell you another story. And again, some of these stories and these nuggets, I hope you can take with you, right? And do with someone else. But so if I share my screen again, here's the parable of the river, okay? So, that's not what I meant to do. You see, you're having a nice little lunch with your friends on the bank of a river, and you see a baby coming down. Ooh, let's save the baby. It's an easy one. And then 20 minutes later, there's two babies floating down the river. Again, take the babies. Another 20 minutes later, there's a slew of babies coming down the river. One, there's not a whole lot of you, and only a couple of you have done training around even how to swim. How do you swim against the currents? Do you have CPR practice or experience? Like, who's on your team? Who's on that riverbank with you? And all of a sudden, one of your team members is running upstream. They're saying, well, I got to figure out where these babies are coming from. I liken that parable to equity and inclusion work, because if we sit saving the babies, what's upriver is not going to change. But we also can't say, let's go upriver and fix it, because those are our kids every day that are still coming down the river, right? It needs to be a multi-pronged to this approach, that we all need to be on it. And what often happens is movements for diversity and inclusion, or equity and justice, choose one or the other. Let's read the articles, let's do the book clubs, let's understand the system. Maybe I need to watch The Hate U Give one more time to understand. I'll watch CNN all the time. We'll do some trainings. The river. The kids are still going down the river. Right? Or we can say, it's just, well, let's just do this. And it's class after class after class. And we say, why isn't the landscape of either public or private education changing? Because we don't have time, because we're looking at the pragmatism of 55 minutes of class over Zoom. How does that analogy resonate with you in your professional lives, if it does, or if it doesn't? Where do you see it play out, or how do you see that play out? And where are you? Are you running upstream, or are you running downstream? Where do you feel equipped? Callie.
I was sort of thinking in terms of Zoom, because in my school, I see the kids 2 days a week in person, and then I see them once on Wednesday on Zoom, and then I don't see them till like the next week, and then you have the new group. And it's just like the school wants you to focus in the classroom. And it's sort of like, okay, do I worry about them at home getting their stuff done, or do I focus in the classroom? You have to put it in the moment. Like, you have to be in the moment, focusing in the classroom. Like, you just have to hope that those kids at home are doing all the work you're posting, which is like a little hard because you're used to 5 days a week in the classroom with kids, like making sure they learn things, but you sort of have to leave them to their own devices. So I'm always like, did I give them enough information to get the work done? It's like, but you have to be like, okay, where are the kids in the classroom? Just sort of like, you got to be in the moment. Like, so I guess like in the middle of the river, sort of catching as they go. But the ones who are slipped down, you have to catch, I guess, next week, or like run down the river for the next week and try to pick them up, I guess, would be the best way to think about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing around organizations, right? We can only pay attention to where we are on the bus, right? Our own sphere of influence. And I would say when I work with a lot of organizations, I work with establishing systems of accountability and a communication, because I'm okay with being in the river, right? I'm okay if I'm part of the student catching team, as long as I know that there are people in my organization that are upstream, that are also looking at the system, so that I'm not constantly like diving, but that I can wade ideally in the river with the kids or with my adult team. And that I also know that there's someone down the river beyond me that is ensuring that anyone who I've missed is being tended to. Because if we don't have a system like that across our organization, can we really say the students are at the center of all that we do? Right? This needs to be a system approach. We don't have the option anymore. And the fear is that that river becomes a matter of course. Similar to how I even began the session. If silencing people over others is a matter of course, and it becomes just, well, maybe that's just the way that she runs her space, which is me, right? And where do we say, excuse me, Dr. Dolan, I know you're in charge, but that was whack, right? how to create spaces where we can bring our own voices to the fore. Jennifer? Martin? Anything of where you are right now. I didn't ask a specific question. You're muted.
Sorry. Where I am right now, just speaking up, you know, sometimes I feel like if I do things and I follow my passion of how I want to speak up, I'm going to get in trouble. But, you know, it's like, I really want to stay with my principles very strongly. And sometimes I feel I just don't have the space to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, because we can't deny the power structures in which we operate.
Well, even in the school I'm in right now, and I'm just covering for someone on maternity leave, and it is a fantastic place. Like, I see that what they're doing is authentic. Yet, because I'm like a guest there, I you know, I think they took me because I think outside the box, but I don't want to push it. It's hard to explain. It's like, am I kind of crossing over where I should be? It's this battle that I have in my head rather than just going in. And like Rodney said, just be yourself. I'm like, okay, they're very progressive. They're very open. Yet at the same time, I don't want to shake anything there. It's hard to explain. I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah.
No, yes, I could, yes, I think, okay, so when I went back to my old high school to become a teacher, at that time, the ALAS, which was called ALAS, Association of Latin American Students, was essentially defunct, right? It was, and at the first meeting, I asked them, and this goes directly to what Jennifer, you were just saying. I said, and I had about 45 kids in the room of a school of 1350. And so maybe there were about 80 Latinos in the school in general, but there was 45 in the room that were coming to kind of rejuvenate alas, which means wings in Spanish. And I said, if none of you were here anymore, if you did not go to the school, let's list the ways in which the school would change. And their response, after a lot of hemming and hawing, getting into pair shares, was nothing. Nothing would change. And I couldn't really disagree with them. And so what our charge was, how can we make it so it would feel different if you were gone, that people would notice? And that was the beginning of reframing and a dynamism around that organization and that group. And I would say, I would ask ourselves the same question: how would our school spaces change if we weren't there anymore? Right? Because if they're hiring us, especially if they're hiring us with the idea that we're bringing something unique because we're out of the box thinkers, then we owe it to them. Something that I've told the school, I've already been in trouble so many times this year, just like I'm a COVID teacher right for the year. Oh, been in trouble so many times. And I said, I didn't write the anti-racist statement this summer. Y'all wrote it. And then you hired me and you told me that it was my responsibility as a teacher to do it. So if you would like to dismiss me for doing what you told everyone on your website that you were doing, go for it. Great story. And they're like, no, see, well, what happened was, it's like, I'm not, you told me that this was what was important to you. And that's why I came. I was like, that's awesome. I want to be a part of that. Right? And it's hard. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but I'm also coming on the other side. Oh, hi, LaRonda. I actually talked to her about this a while back. I'm coming from feeling beaten down and so silenced that hearing the sound of my voice now with the thunder that it has, that it makes me want to cry, because I'm like, where the heck have you been? Right? Like, we can't just be there window dressing. And if I let you make me quiet, then what model am I serving to my students? Right? When we tell them your voice matters, you can be the change. Right? It's a lie. And we've been lying to our kids for too long. Well, we were lied to, right? Just follow the rules, and then you'll eventually, and that's what happened, right? You know, my parents were like, it was either, I'm sorry. So, parents are immigrants from Latin America. I didn't learn English until I was 6, but I remember when I got into grad school, my girlfriend and I were deciding on where we're going to go, and I opted for Harvard, and she was going to do law, and she opted for Yale law versus Harvard law. And when we told my mom what we had decided, my girlfriend said, so I decided on Yale, right? On Yale. And my mom said, why? What did you do? How long do you have to be there? And I was like, what? No, she's going to the university, right? Not jail. But anyways, my point in, even my parents said, we worked so hard for you just to be a teacher, right? And they're still somewhat devastated, right? Because, and from my vantage point is, it's an extremely powerful position. It's the most dangerous occupation, right? That's amazing. And we could do so much. We have so much power. Questions, comments? Jennifer B.
So I've been sitting here thinking about this past summer. Our school had a Black at social media issue, along with many. And I've been doing DEI work in this school for the 2 years that I've been there. But prior to, I was in DC public schools and Montgomery County, Maryland public schools, where this has, been part of my vocabulary for a long, long time. And I was astounded this summer at the number of webinars that I participated in, where I was hearing white educators be like, this is not the school that I've known. This is not, the America that I'm going, where have you been? Like, it's astounding to me. And so I think as educators, we can be a huge part of the solution, but also a huge part of the problem. And, I think about I am the director of the library, and the first thing that I did walking in the door was look at the books, and literally looking at the books and recognizing that there were very few brown faces on the covers of books. And so that has been the intention for the whole time that I've been there, is changing the collection. We talk about windows and doors and sliding windows and mirrors and sliding doors, and we are the ones that have to do that. I just want to, encourage folks also. I'm a change maker and always causing problems. So I tend to ignore the adults and go to the kids directly, because if the adults are causing the problem, I can't necessarily help and save them, but I can redirect the kids.
Margaret.
I think that's so interesting what you raised the point when we're trying to bring about this change. Well, two things. First of all, Lizette, I want to say I think that's so powerful what you said about I can keep taking the babies out of the river if I know there's somebody upriver trying to deal with it. And it sounds heartbreaking that you were trying to take the babies out of the river, and the people who are supposed to be up the river stopping the flow were like, we're not stopping the flow. What are you talking about? Keep taking the babies. So that's right? That's a very powerful analogy I'm going to carry with me from this. But to what Jennifer, I think it was just saying, this idea that this isn't who we were and people didn't see it. The Poway Synagogue, my high school has the unfortunate distinction of, or district, producing 2 mass shooters, the Aurora shooting and the Poway Synagogue shooter. And so I'm super involved in Moms Demand Action, actually. But when the Poway Synagogue shooting happened, people were saying, how could this happen in our inclusive community? And I've always thought, as a Californian, I lived in New York, I've taught in Massachusetts now, like that I've grown up in these diverse, inclusive places. And yet, when I was in high school in San Diego, Metzger, I can't remember his first name, the guy who coined the lone wolf terminology, would pass out pamphlets at our high school about how the Holocaust was a hoax and are you tired of politicians? They were on these dollar bills. And on the back, it had this whole thing about how the Holocaust was a hoax. And my grandparents, as I mentioned before, my mother, like I'm half Puritan, half like survivors of genocide in Europe. So, it was a very complicated thing for me because no one talked about these pamphlets that would talk about, bash homosexuals and people of color. And are you tired of politicians kowtowing to all of this? And they were just swept up. They were routinely put on our campus, swept up. No one ever talked about it. So in the discussions that happened after the Poway Synagogue shooting, all the people saying, how could this happen in our school? And it was so dismaying that everybody who remembered these pamphlets was either a person of color, had a connection to Judaism, or was gay. Mm-hmm. None of my very dear social justice involved friends even remembered these, right? So that just led to these conversations about like, what do we see? Who do we hear? What matters to us? Because like, if we're going to talk about who America is today, right? Like it didn't come out of nowhere that my high school that also taught me so much. Like when I was in high school, there was also a conversation about making Martin Luther King. This holiday we have today wasn't a legal holiday when I was a kid. They were making it a legal holiday, and Arizona was fighting it next door, where my older sister was in college, right? So like, we sometimes choose to remember. And I think there's this hard balance between like, no one wants to feel ashamed of their history or their past or the things they love. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to acknowledge that we have some problems. And if we don't, to your beautiful analogy, if we don't start thinking about what's coming down from the river, right? To say like, how are all these babies? Wow, there's suddenly all these babies in the river. Where did they come from? Like it always comes from somewhere. And so I don't know how, I don't want to talk too long, but I like to unpack this idea of like, am I interested in this? Because like, if I were a different human with different human experiences, would I still be this committed to this issue? Right? Like, is it narcissistic for me that I have skin in the game? Or is it like, I don't know how we have these conversations, except what I appreciate so much in this whole dialogue we're having today is just honesty and accepting people. Right? Like, yeah. And feeling Margaret. There's somebody up the river, I guess.
Or we'd like to know that there are Tiffany and then Demond. And then I know that people are getting ready to go to the next session. So I want to honor that. And go ahead, Tiffany.
So mine was
Thank you, Margaret.
I was working with the town's elementary school as a student job. I had looked at the books because I wanted to organize them. They were all disasters. And many of them were celebrations of Columbus. Books that are written way before we understood the purpose of Columbus. And then some mestiza as a colonial term for somebody who's of European and indigenous heritage. I'm like, he started the genocide to slaughter my ancestors. So it was very easy for me when I made that comment to got the teachers to throw out all those Columbus books. But similar to what Margaret was saying, yes, Margaret. There was an incident at my college where somebody had vandalized an Arabic poster, an Ivan Williams poster. Somebody had gouged out the eyes, slit the throat, and threw a cross on a Muslim student's poster. And I was there for 6 years and nobody remembered this. No one in administration, nobody had remembered this, nobody had recalled this, except the Muslim Student Union, who also got prank calls the next following days. And somebody tried to take away their halal by claiming that there was no halal in the food. And I was just from this Muslim Student Union, and nobody had remembered this except the people who have left Williams. Mm-hmm. And it was horrific. And I was saying, like, you guys want to talk about racism and diversity, but you guys don't remember this incident. You guys swept it under the rug. So yeah. I don't feel the authenticism that my college was producing. when I was talking
Mhm.
about it. And we tried to talk about this, but the president of our college always shut us down.
Thank you,
It
Tiffany.
was, yeah.
Demand, and then I'm going to say, I'd like to say a few words, and then go ahead, Demand.
Just really, really quick. I know we're for the essence of time. I posted a couple of links, a couple of resources in there of a broadcast I do monthly through an organization I have called Peace, which stands for Please Educate All Children Equally out here in the Philadelphia area. So check that out. And I wanted to say thank you for this forum. And also, I think Jennifer B said, she mentioned about us, this is not who we are. And this is definitely who we are. It's who we've always been. And one of my first sessions speaks to that. The one that's titled, What to the Slave is 4th of July by Frederick Douglass. So looking at that work and unpacking that. So check that out. I'll put my email in the chat also in case you don't want to see get in contact with me. So as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damon. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it might not be who you've known the United States to be or for the school. And I would then, for not you, but whoever I'm talking to, say, why do you think that is? Because there's other people in the room who have a very different experience who would say it's exactly what they've known or experienced. Wouldn't that be an interesting conversation to have? Right? We often say, how come staff or faculty of color don't stay? I would flip it and let's ask white people, why do you stay so long? What makes you feel so good here? Can we replicate that? Right? And to go to what you mentioned, Margaret, about we don't want to make people feel guilty or this and that. I say, here's the thing. If by complicating the conversation about Christopher Columbus in October at a school, by letting it be, let's talk about this. If the fear is that we don't want to make people uncomfortable, what I challenge the school is saying, so what you're telling me is it's okay that I'm uncomfortable. It's okay that the school having Christopher Columbus holiday. You're saying that my pain, it's not even discomfort. My pain is something that we can live with. And then you wonder why I don't stay. Right? So that's the thing that I ask. When people say, oh, we don't want people to feel uncomfortable. We don't want them to feel shame. Who's the them? Who are we talking about? And maybe it's yourself even. Right? But you're privileging the feelings. I'm privileging the feelings of Demond and Demi and W. Tang in elevating their voices. Because as men of color, I want them to feel heard. And yes, I do. But that cannot be at the expense of Margaret or Jennifer. Right? And it becomes interesting because of the intersectionality of our identities. Right? Here we have women who we know, and there's male privilege, but then we have these are men of color in light of white male privilege. These are complicated conversations. And we are complex individuals of how we experience all of this. And a piece of it is coming out with, okay, let me intellectually understand these, pieces and let me do my homework. But a lot of it is why was that such a sticking point for me? Or why did I retreat when she said that? Or what was it about that made me lean in, right? And what pieces of this might be levers that we can turn or pull or switch within our own communities, depending on our identities within those spaces, right? How long we've been there, what our positional authority is or isn't, understanding again that we even have all these other layers of our identity within these organizations. And as I said before, I don't know if you have access to the PowerPoint, or I'll make sure that participants do, but I do this work. with organizations. So please know that. Any final questions or thoughts? I always love to end with gratitude. And so I thank you for sharing your Monday with me, especially a day off potentially for many of you. Billy. Oh, just bye. Okay. All right. Bye, Billy. All right. Thank you for being patient with this. And I wasn't sure how that early activity was going to go and how it was going to shape the way it went. So thank you for sort of just kind of going with the flow and being flexible. So, all right. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the next session.